Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Can you imagine a woman who ruled disguised as a man in the colonial America of the 17th century? Discover the incredible mystery of Catalina de Erauso, an epic story that will leave you breathless. Subscribe and activate the bell so as not to miss anything. Prepare, because the story of Catalina de Erauso is so incredible that it seems taken from a novel. He was born in San Sebastián, within a Basque noble family, in 1592. Since childhood, he showed an indomitable rebel character, far from the female canons of the time. Imagine a girl who preferred the sword to the needles, the horse to the seam. That was Catalina, a woman who would challenge social conventions and, above all, her own destiny. At age 15, fed up with the monacal life to which they forced her, Catalina fled. He escaped from a convent in San Sebastián, dressing with men's clothes and taking the identity of a young man named Captain Francisco de Loyola. This radical change marked the beginning of an epic adventure, a trip that would take it through continents and battles, where her courage and ingenuity would be her greatest allies. Her journey took her to America, where she enrolled in the army. He participated in numerous battles, demonstrating an exceptional value in the combat field, winning the respect and admiration of his classmates. Think about her, fighting as a man, in the midst of chaos and the violence of colonial wars. Its history is a challenge to gender identity and an example of unwavering courage. A luxury that few could imagine. Your childhood passed in a Basque stately house, surrounded by servants, with large gardens and the comfort that only the nobility could afford. Imagine children's games between old stone walls, the sound of the waves of the Cantabrian in the background, and the smell of noble wood and wild flowers in the air. You received an education according to your status. They taught you to read and write, to embroider, to play instruments, and to develop in the sophisticated meetings of high society. The label and courtesy lessons were as important as those of history or religion. Your life was a constant learning within a privileged world. Despite opulence, life in your home was not exempt from the rules and expectations of the time. The rigid family discipline, the social pressure to maintain appearances, and the norms of behavior that governed the life of the Basque nobility formed your day-to-day. But despite everything, your childhood was a time of splendor and privilege. But that privileged childhood was truncated abruptly. They sent you to a convent, a place where religious austerity and discipline replaced games and laughter. Imagine the cold stone walls, the imposing silence, the smell of incense and the constant pressure of monastic life. A radical change that moved you away from everything you knew and sowed the seed of your rebellion. Life in the convent was rigorous. Endless prayers, fasting, manual works. It was a monotonous and suffocating existence that drastically contrasted with your free and adventurous spirit. The rigidity of the norms, the lack of freedom, oppression. All this was feeding a growing sensation of confinement and frustration. That constant oppression did nothing more than strengthen your determination. Inside you, a spark of rebellion was increasingly intense, a fire that challenged the rules imposed and longed for freedom. You refused to accept a life that was not yours, a life that seemed like a golden prison. And in that rejection of the established, your determination to escape, to look for your own path. But the walls of the convent could not contain the indomitable spirit of Catalina. At a dark night, under the cold moonlight, you took advantage of an oversight. You climbed walls, you raffled asleep guards, and you slid in the shadows like a ghost, leaving behind the monacal life that oppressed you. Freedom, although dangerous, called you with irresistible force. Once outside, the immensity of the night wrapped you. Without a defined plan, only with the certainty that you did not want to return, you walked for hours, fear and hope battle inside you. Dawn found you away from the convent, lost but free. The decision was taken. You should change your life, and to do it, you should change your identity. You cut your long hair, you got rid of your habit and looked for male clothes, borrowed garments, stolen perhaps. The mirror reflected an unknown, but liberating image. You were no longer the nun Catalina de Erauso, but a young man, a boy named Francisco de Loyola. Your new identity, a shield against a relentless world, would allow you to undertake the trip to a life that you would decide. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%, free finally. You are in a lost town, far from the walls of the convent. You are looking for shelter and anonymity, and the first step is radical. Undoing your long hair, symbol of your female past, in a small mirror, under the dim light of a candle, you observe your reflexes. Those delicate features that remind you of the woman you left behind. Scissors, provided with dissimulation, are your transformation tool. The cut is rough, hurried, but effective. Each strand that falls to the ground is a piece of your old life. You feel a chill, not only because of the cold of the night, but for the magnitude of the change you are undertaking. The transformation is not only physical, it is a liberation, a symbolic act of breaking with your past and embrace your new destiny. With short hair, you look again in the mirror. You are no longer the same. The face, although still delicate, projects a new force, a strong determination. Haircut is not just a change of image, it is a change of identity, a crucial step in your bold decision to live as a man. You feel closer to freedom you longed for, closer to being the one who really wants to be. With cut hair, you feel lightened, but you still lack the essential, clothes. Finding a man's suit in a remote town is not an easy task, but the need drives you. You are looking for the used clothes that sell in an improvised position, looking for something that allows you to go unnoticed. The fabric is rough, perhaps something worn, but it is masculine enough for your purpose. The smell of sweat and earth reminds you of the harsh reality of your new life. Thick wool shots, a faded linen shirt and a baggy jacket, too large but hides your female figure. It is not elegant, but it is enough to hide your identity. You look at the stagnant water mirror of an old picture and surprise yourself. The image that returns you is that of a young, thin and insecure boy, a man still under construction, but a man at last. You adjust the jacket, make sure that the shirt does not appear too much, and put on a raid hat to hide your face. The change is radical, almost magical. You feel different, safer, more invisible. The suit is not just a garment, it is an armor, a mask that allows you to move with more freedom in this new world that you have created. It is the first step towards a life where your genre is a choice, not a conviction. Finally, with the clothes borrow, you feel a little more man, but the appearance is just the beginning. Walking, talking, even sitting requires new learning. You observe the men of the people, studying their gestures, the way they move, the way they speak between them. Imitating them is not easy. Your body, accustomed to a different posture, protests with each clumsy movement. Language is also a challenge. The words you use, the tone of your voice, should change. You listen carefully to conversations, trying to imitate local jargon, rhythm, and male intonation. Each poorly pronounced word, every female gesture that escapes, reminds you of your fragile deception. The fear of being discovered stalks you constantly. But the greatest difficulty lies in physical skills. Men perform tasks that seem impossible. Horse riding, handle tools, fight. All this requires strength, skill, and familiarity with the body that you do not possess. Each failed attempt frustrates you, but the need drives you to continue practicing, to perfect your new identity, to become the man you need to be to survive. The first days were a whirlwind. Imitating the male posture, the way of walking, was more difficult than you imagined. Every movement, every gesture, betrayed you. Sitting with open legs, without crossing them as you were accustomed, caused you a constant discomfort. Even the simple fact of eating required a conscious effort to avoid any movement that revealed your secret. The look of men, analyzing every detail, made you feel constantly exposed. Talking like a man was another challenge. Your voice, more acute than that of others, forced you to modulate it carefully, to speak with less emphasis, to control each tone. Vulgar language and jokes among men were strange to you, even more difficult to assimilate. The fear of being discovered was a constant that forced you to always be alert, to observe and learn from each interaction. Physical work was strenuous. Your hands, accustomed to other tasks, were filled with calluses and blisters. The long days left you exhausted, but you should hide your tiredness. The pain was a silent partner, a constant reminder of the price of your decision. However, with every day that happened, you felt a little safer, a little more man, or at least, that was what you tried to convince yourself. Prosody. Speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Sitting with your legs open, like men, was a constant challenge. But the name was your armor. Captain Francisco de Erauso. It sounded imposing, powerful, a name that wrapped you in a new identity, a shell against inquisitive looks and suspicions. Francisco, a name that allowed you to move with a security that was previously unknown to you, a name that gave you the value to move forward. It was your last name, an anchor to your past, but also a shield that protected you. Captain. A title that resonated with authority, which opened doors that were previously closed, that allowed you to impose respect, even if you felt the tremor of uncertainty. It was a dangerous game, of course, but it was your game, and in that game, the name was your best letter. With every day that passed, the name became more real, more yours. Captain Francisco de Erauso was no longer only a mask, but an integral part of you. I protected you, I empowered you, allowed you to sail in a hostile world, a world that was not made for you, but now, with that name, it seemed to surrender to your audacity. It was a shield, a sword, an identity forged in necessity and courage. A name that protected you, but the trip was another beast. You embarked on a galleon, a wooden and candles monster, towards the new world. The ocean, immense and cruel, extended to you, a promise and a threat to equal parts. The smell of salt, old wood, and fear impregnated every corner of the ship. The constant balancing, the immensity of the sea, reminded you of your fragility, despite your name. Endless days happened, each equal to the previous one. A monotony scored by the cry of the seagulls and the creak of the wood. The scorching sun burned your skin, the rain soaked you to the bones. Diseases lurked, silent and mortal, while the crew fought against scurvy and storms. You, with your secret in tow, clung to the hope of a new life. The nights were still worse. The starry sky, beautiful but indifferent, reminded you of human insignificance against the immensity of the cosmos. The fear of the unknown, the pirates, the marine monsters, accompanied you in each sigh, but in the midst of that terror, an inner fire, an unwavering determination, pushed you forward. America was waiting for you. A land full of dangers and opportunities, where your new life could really start. Finally, you step on the mainland in the port of Callao. Lima, the city of the kings, was waiting for you. The air was dense, loaded with the spice and saltpeter aroma. From a distance, you saw the imposing walls, stone buildings, and the brightness of the sun on the ocean. A torrent of new sensations flooded you. The bustle of the city, the different languages that mixed in the air, the mixture of races and cultures. You went into the narrow and cobbled streets, observing the life that flowed around you. Carriages thrown by mules, street vendors offering their merchandise, people of all social classes crossing your steps. The cultural clash was immense, but you moved cautiously, watching, adapting. Your name protected you, but surveillance was your best ally. Your first meetings with Lima society were cautious. You talked to people, you learned their customs, and you earned confidence little by little. Life in Lima was complex, a mixture of extreme opulence and poverty, power and despair. But you, with your cunning and determination, found your place in that world, even in the shadows. The imposing walls of Lima left you breathless, but the city, with its bustle and opportunities, did not offer you the path you were looking for. Quiet life was not for you. You needed action, adventure, something beyond the comforts that Lima offered, and that need led you to make a radical decision. You enlisted in the Spanish army. Imagine you, disguised as a man, among hundreds of soldiers, preparing for military life. At first, it was difficult. The discipline was rigorous, strenuous training, but your determination was unwavering. You quickly adapted to military life. You learned to use weapons, to fight, to survive in adverse conditions. Your natural ability and your courage allowed you to stand out among your classmates, gaining respect and admiration, although some would see you suspicious. Your rise in the ranks of the army was meteoric. Your bravery on the battlefield, your cunning and your natural leadership took you quickly positions of responsibility. You participated in several military campaigns, demonstrating an innate capacity for strategy and combat. From Raso soldier you became a respected officer, gaining the trust of your superiors and the fear of your enemies. Prosody. Speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. So you got ready. The uniform, heavy and rough, was adjusted to your agile body. The smell of gunpowder and sweat became your daily perfume. Your first battle was a deafening chaos. The steel clash, the screams, the fear, but also the adrenaline that pushed you forward. You learned fast, to dodge swords, to point precisely, to keep calm under enemy fire. You discovered a strength in yourself that you did not know. You won respect, not for your gender, but for your skill. With each victory, your reputation grew. You learned military strategies, melee combat tactics, and the importance of discipline and teamwork. Your skill with the sword was legendary. Your precise and lethal movements, a testimony of your courage and training. You participated in countless skirmishes and battles over the years. You saw death closely, you felt it in the air, you touched her in your classmates' blood. But experience hardened you, forged you in a relentless warrior. You weren't just one more soldier. You were a budding legend, an enigmatic figure that inspired both admiration and fear. The heat of battle joined men who, like you, sought survival. Captain Alvarez, a veteran tanned by the sun and battles, taught you to use the sword with a lethal precision. His severe gaze hid an unwavering loyalty, a friendship forged in the fire of combat. He saw you, accepted you, and protected you under its shadow, more than a superior, an older brother on the battlefield. But not all were allies. Lieutenant Vargas, an ambitious and cruel man, saw you as a threat. His envy was manifested in fulminant looks and in constant attempts to sabotage your actions. His hatred was palpable, a poison that extended in the hostile environment of the camp, a constant danger that you learned to dodge with cunning and courage. You learned to discern between true loyalty and undercover betrayal. Friendship, in that brutal world, was a precious treasure, an oasis in the middle of the desert of war. But you also learned that enmity, fed by ambition and envy, could be as lethal as any bullet or sword. And you, with your innate ability for strategy and fight, knew how to sail both seas. In the midst of chaos and the adrenaline of war, you met Isabella. His eyes, dark and deep like American night, captivated you from the first moment. She, a woman of free spirit and a dazzling beauty, challenged the conventions of the time. She was the daughter of a rich landowner, and her gaze, full of intelligence and rebellion, crossed with yours hidden during the brief moments of truce in the camp. Your conversations, whispered under the night, became stolen moments of happiness. You shared your secrets, your doubts, your fears. She, without judging you, listened to you with attention that made you forget your costume for a moment. The risk was huge. If someone discovered your true identity, both would pay a high price. But the love that flourished among you was stronger than any fear. The poaching encounters became a necessity, an addiction. You stole moments in the shadows, under the vigilant look of the stars. Each caress, each look, was a calculated risk, a challenge to society and conventions. Isabella's love gave you strength, made you feel alive, despite the constant threat of being discovered. It was a forbidden, clandestine, dangerous, but intensely real love. But the romance with Isabella, as passionate as fleeting, brought with it a new and scary danger. Each look, every touch, every shared word, was a risky bet. The possibility that someone discovered your secret, who realized that after the rough appearance of a soldier a woman was hidden, pursued you as a shadow. You slept with an open eye, always alert, waiting for the moment when your deception could be revealed. Fear became your inseparable partner. Every time someone looked at you too much, a chill ran through you. The simple fact of having to pretend a serious voice, a male posture, exhausted you physically and mentally. You constantly wondered if your secret was about to be discovered, if someone had noticed any peculiarity in your behavior or your appearance. The constant threat of exposure forced you to live with permanent tension. Each conversation, each social interaction, became an act of precarious balance. You should control your movements, your voice, your gestures, to avoid any signal that could betray your true identity. The mask you wore began to weigh more and more, threatening to break at any time. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. The possibility that his secret came to light was a sword of Damocles on his head. Every day was a performance, a constant game to keep the appearance. You had to be careful with your gestures, with your voice, with every word you pronounced. A slip, a moment of weakness, could destroy everything you had built. The masculinity you had adopted was not only a physical armor, but also a carefully elaborate mask that you should keep impolitive. You learned to control your body, to walk, to speak, to behave like a man. You dominated the art of concealment, hiding your emotions, your fears, your doubts. Your body became an instrument that you should accurately manipulate, a puppet in your hands. Each movement, every look, every gesture, must be consistent with the identity you had chosen. Loneliness became your ally, a shelter where you could relax the mask, where you could afford a moment of vulnerability without anyone seeing it. But even in solitude, surveillance was constant. Your mind worked tirelessly, building and reconstructing your male identity, anticipating possible dangers, planning strategies to overcome them. That it was a dangerous game, a survival game. Your life was now a relentless routine. Icy early morning, strenuous exercises under the scorching sun, and the constant threat of military discipline. Each order should be obeyed to the letter, each foul, punished severely. You slept in a hard bed, you shared a scarce food pot and learned to value silence rather than conversation. Life in the army taught you the importance of obedience and the need for self-discipline. But there were also moments of camaraderie. You shared stories with your classmates, men tanned by battle, some with scars that told silent stories. At night, under a starry sky, you shared laughs, jokes, and confidences, creating unexpected ties of friendship. It was them, your weapons brothers, who protected you and those who offered you a little comfort in the solitude of your costume. Military life was a constant challenge. Hunger, disease, and constant risk of death were your daily classmates. The strenuous marches under the relentless sun, the bloody battles, and the uncertainty of the future constantly persecuted you. But despite everything, there was something that kept you standing: the need to survive, to keep your secrets safe and find your own path in this hostile world. But life in the army was not static. Soon, your unit mobilized. You remember the red dust raising behind the wallets, the relentless sun on your face, and constant tiredness in your muscles. The landscape changed abruptly. From the arid plains to the imposing Andes, the rare air made you feel every step, every breath. Then, the jungle humidity wrapped you like a second skin. Suffocating heat and lush vegetation suffocated. The sound of insects was deafening, a counterpoint to the silence of starry nights. You browsed cautelous rivers on fragile vessels, where the danger stalking in each curve, in each swirl. The bustling ports, full of people everywhere, were a surprising contrast. The smell of saltpeter and spices filled the air, mixed with the aroma of exotic goods. In each city, in each town, life was different, a kaleidoscope of cultures and customs that surprised you and sometimes baffled you. But you, always adapting, you, always surviving. From the humid jungles to the arid plains, of the imposing Andes to the abrupt coasts. Your trip was an odyssey, a journey that forged you, which molded you. Each landscape, each encounter, each challenge left you an indelible brand, a testimony of your courage, your resilience, your ability to adapt to the unknown. Each trip was a lesson, every step, a victory. Tiredness mixed with uncertainty. One day, you were sharing a ration of dry meat with your classmates. The next, you were in the middle of a pitched battle, the smell of gunpowder by burning your nose. Then luck changed. An unexpected victory brought you a considerable loot. Gold coins, jewelry, and the promise of a more comfortable life. But joy was ephemeral, like the brightness of gold in the sun. You spent prodigality, believing that fortune was eternal. You allowed you to have ever imagined. Fine clothes, abundant food, and the company of influential people. But life, unpredictable as always, snatched everything. A bad investment, a failed bet, or perhaps simply bad fortune. Everything vanished, leaving you on the street, with the void in your pockets and bitterness in your heart. Again, poverty hugged you with its cold hand. Hunger and despair became your constant classmates. You remember the humiliation of begging, the cold of homeless nights, and the bitter taste of defeat. But in the midst of the dark, a spark of hope remained on, driving you to move forward, to look for a new opportunity, a new way of escaping the cruelty of fortune. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. The heat of the battle faded, replaced by the bustle of Buenos Aires. You were in a new, vibrant and chaotic city, a melting pot of cultures where Spanish mixed with the Guarani and Quechua. The cobbled, narrow and dusty streets were full of people. Merchants, soldiers, indigenous, slaves. A different world than you knew, with their own rules and dangers. Life in Buenos Aires presented you constant challenges. You should keep your secret, hiding your true identity at every step. The colonial society was rigid, with clearly defined gender roles. A woman alone, like you, was vulnerable, exposed to trial and danger. Each interaction, each look, was a proof of your ability to adapt and survival. To survive, you learned to be cunning, to read the signals, to navigate social complexities. Finding work was difficult, but your courage and your experience in military life helped you find a place in society. You worked hard, you won the respect of some, the distrust of others, but you cling to your costume, to your new identity, as if it were a protective shield. Your reputation as a soldier, forged in the heat of the battle, did not go unnoticed in Buenos Aires. Some saw you with admiration, others with envy. You were soon in the midst of disputes with experienced officers, veterans who were suspicious of your fast ascent and your mysterious past. His murmurs, loaded with suspicion, became veiled challenges, threatening looks during night guards. The rivalries intensified. A captain, corpulent and with a long career in the colonies, challenged you to a duel. The affront was public, a calculated humiliation to stain your newly lived honor. You accepted, knowing that your life hit a thread, but also aware that you could not allow doubt about your worth spreading. On another occasion, a dispute for resources and supplies between your unity and another, led by a cruel ensign known for his cruelty, was about to lead to a pitched battle. Your cunning and your ability to strategy allowed you to avoid direct confrontation, but tensions remained latent, a constant threat to your position and your security. Your skill with the sword and your courage on the battlefield did not go unnoticed. You won respect and envy your classmates in Buenos Aires. The competition was fierce, but your ambition pushed you to climb positions. You watched with attention to your superiors, studying their strategies, learning from their mistakes and looking for the opportunity to demonstrate your worth. A dispute between two captains offered you the perfect opportunity. You positioned yourself with intelligence, supporting the weakest, but demonstrating your loyalty through decisive actions on the battlefield. Your political cunning and your military courage made you a valuable asset, indispensable for any of the factions. Your ascent was fast and meteoric. You were appointed lieutenant, then captain. Each battle won, every successful strategic decision, brought you closer to the top. You were no longer just one more soldier. You were a key figure, respected by some, feared by others. The ambition had taken you to the top, but the road was not exempt from dangers. Your ascent was meteoric, but the danger stalked point one night. After an overwhelming victory, the celebration was out of control. The wine ran free, and in the middle of the revelry, a fight almost discovers you. An accurate blow on the face tear your shirt, revealing an instant of your secret. The rapid reaction of your friends, who attributed the incident to an accident, saved you from the exhibition. On another occasion, a disease prostrated you in bed. The weakness made you vulnerable. The doctor, an experienced man, noticed unusual details in your anatomy during exploration. His inquisitive gaze froze your blood, but fortunately, he attributed your peculiarities to a strange malformation. The relief was immense, but fear was recorded in your memory. During a baptism, the proximity to the church put you at risk. The priest, with his hands on your head, almost detects the truth in the ritual. The rubbing of his fingers on your skin was a moment of intense terror, however. The ceremony continued its course without incident, and your secret remained safe, at least for the moment. The tension, however, was palpable. Your heart was beating strongly. The sword still smoked slightly in your hands. You had managed to divert attention, pretending a deeper drunkenness that you really felt, a feigned stumbling, an incoherent phrase, everything calculated so that the revelation of your secret will go unnoticed in the middle of chaos. The prevailing confusion was your best ally that night. /prosody, /speak. Speak, a prosody rate equals 90%. Days later, the situation became critical. A suspicious officer began to investigate your past. But your intelligence saved you again. Not only did you know perfectly the military customs, but you had also learned to read people. You noticed your doubt, your hesitation. You took advantage of that weakness, offering crucial information about a common enemy. The distraction was perfect. On another occasion, they were unjustly accused of a robbery. The evidence seemed overwhelming, but your sharp ingenuity allowed you to find a failure in the testimony of the witnesses with an unparalleled mastery. You manipulated the words, revealing contradictions and sowing the doubt in the minds of the judges. Your ability to observe the details, to remember each gesture and every word, was decisive. They declared you innocent. You incorporated slowly, the metallic flavor of the blood still present in your mouth. The deception had worked, but the tension was still there, palpable as the humidity of the night. Your body, exhausted, asked for rest, but your mind, sharp as a razor, already planned the following movement. There was no time for weakness. Survival depended on your cunning and your strong will. Each scar, each blow suffered, became a step more on your path. You did not allow the luxury of pain, you ignored it, you submitted it to your unwavering will. You had learned to tame fear, to turn it into a tool, the spark that drove you forward, towards freedom you despaired with despair. That inner force, that unwavering determination, was not something innate, but a muscle that you had forged through suffering, adversity, and constant struggle. It was an invisible strength. A shield against the doubts and fears that lurked you. It was the will of iron that had allowed you to survive until this moment, and that would continue to guide you towards the uncertain future. The cold crucifix against your skin, an ephemeral comfort. Faith, once a shelter, now felt like a weight, an extra load in your already exhausted existence. Has God forgiven your transgressions? Did you justify your survival, your lies, your stolen life? The doubt, an insidious worm, slowly carcoming your conscience, feeding on the shadows of your actions. You remember the prayers whispered in secret, the furtive masses held hidden under the mantle of the night. But were they authentic? Or just a shield, one more way to hide, to protect you from the judgment of others? The contradiction overwhelmed you. The need to believe, the impossibility of reconciling your faith with the reality of your actions. The weight of guilt was tangible, a constant presence that accompanied you in each step, in each decision. Could you find inner peace one day? Could faith, authentic or fake, offer you the forgiveness that you long for? The answer was lost in the maze of your own contradictions, as complex as the life you had chosen. But loneliness was not your only partner. In the heat of battles, in the hardship of escape, or in the simple coexistence of the taverns, you found friendly faces. Remember Alonso, the tan soldier who, despite your secret, treated you with camaraderie. His adventure stories torn you smiles, a balm for your tired soul. He never questioned you. He only offered you his friendship, an oasis in your inner desert. And then Ines was, the humble peasant who welcomed you in her home during your convalescence after a wound. His simple goodness, his generosity without expecting anything in return, moved you deeply. She saw you, not the soldier, but to the person who struggled to survive, and offered you a warm shelter where your injured soul could rest. Those friends, born in adverse circumstances, were the headlights that guided you through darkness. They were not blood ties or social conveniences, but authentic connections forged in the melting pot of shared experience. In their eyes you found the acceptance that you longed for, a reflection of your humanity beyond your costume. Alonso, with his kindness and street cunning, helped you overcome more than one legal problem. You remember that time in Lima, unjustly accused of theft. The colonial prison was hell, but Alonso, with his contacts, managed to free you, although in exchange for a favor that still weighs you in consciousness. Justice, or the lack of it, was a currency in the air in those lands, where wealth and power decided your destiny. On other occasions, the law favored you by chance. In that dispute over an inheritance in Buenos Aires, the judge, a corrupt but surprisingly right man in that particular case, failed in your favor. Perhaps it was the irrefutable evidence, or perhaps just a heart, whatever, allowed you to keep the money you had earned with such an effort and risk. But corruption was a cancer that the judicial system from its foundations. Prosody, speak. Speak, the prosody rate equals 90%. Injustice reigned on many occasions. You saw how the law was applied differently according to social status, that a nobleman could commit a crime and leave unpunished, while a poor man was condemned to whipping for a minor offense. You, disguised as a man, witnessed this cruel inequality, learning to navigate among the recesses of a system that favored the powerful and left the weak at the mercy of their arbitrariness. But Alonso was not the only one who helped you survive. Your innate ability for strategy and combat, learned in the hard school of survival, allowed you to stand out in the Spanish army. Remember that battle in the Argentine Pampas, you, disguised as a man, leading a squad of soldiers surprised by your courage and skill. Your courage was not only an act of rebellion, but a force that transformed each challenge into an opportunity. Your participation in different military campaigns, although under the veil of anonymity, had a significant impact. Your bold tactics, your knowledge of the land, and your ability to inspire your men, regardless of their origin or range, contributed to more than one decisive victory. Think about the impact of your actions on the geopolitics of the time. A woman hidden among the soldiers rewriting the history books. Although your true identity remains secret, your military legacy is undeniable. Catalina de Erauso, the nun who became a soldier, left an indelible mark on the military history of Spanish colonial America. Your courage and your military ability challenged social conventions and changed, even if it is subtly, the way in which the role of women on the battlefield was perceived. You were an example of courage and strategy, a legend that transcended your own life. Your life in the army opened a window to the rigid social structure of New Spain. You observed the huge gap between the Creole elite, the Spaniards born in America, with their estates and privileges, and the indigenous population, subject to a system of parcels that often brushed slavery. You, disguised as a man, moved among these worlds, a silent witness of their inequalities. Everyday life was a constant struggle for most. Women, especially indigenous people, carried the weight of domestic and agricultural work, while men were dedicated to manual work or to the service of the Spaniards. The Catholic religion was the central axis of social life, marking festivities, moral norms, and hierarchy itself. In cities, life was somewhat more complex, with a growing mestizo population that occupied an intermediate space in the social scale. You, navigating between classes, learned to adapt your behavior to survive. The opulence of the rich contrasted brutally with the extreme poverty of many, a reality that marked you deeply. And so, between battles and skirmishes, your life was impregnated by colonial culture. Imagine the aroma of exotic spices in the markets, the vibrant music of religious festivals, the mixture of indigenous, Spanish, and African cultures that manifested itself in architecture, gastronomy, and customs. The opulence of Baroque churches contrasted with the poverty of many, creating a complex and fascinating society, full of contradictions. You met the Catholic religion, omnipresent in New Spain. Processions, sermons, popular devotion, everything was part of the social fabric. But you also observed religious syncretization, the mixture of indigenous beliefs with Catholicism, a phenomenon that intrigued you and made you reflect on the complexity of cultural identities. The language itself was a melting pot of influences. Spanish, with its regional variations and its loans of indigenous languages, became your communication tool, but also showed you the wealth and linguistic diversity of the New World. You learned to navigate this cultural labyrinth, adapting and surviving thanks to your ingenuity and your ability to observe. After so many years, the arrival in Spain was a clash. The port, the crowd, the smells, everything was different from what you remembered or to what you had imagined. But the goal was clear. Find your family, face your past, and perhaps seek peace that you long for after such an agitated life. The journey itself was an odyssey, full of dangers and adventures, but nothing comparable to what awaited you on the mainland. The reunion with your family was complicated. The surprise, the disbelief, the mixture of emotions on their faces. Everything was a whirlwind. Your life as a man, your adventures, your battles. Everything was something that they could not believe or understand. Your past, that you had tried to erase, now rose like a ghost, threatening to destroy the tranquility you were looking for. Prosody, speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. But the Spanish society of the time was not prepared for your history. The idea of a woman who had lived so many years in a man was scandalous, inconceivable. You faced the Inquisition, justice, society itself. Your secret, so well kept for so long, was now a double-edged sword, capable of destroying you or, perhaps, of giving you the opportunity to finally be yourself, without masks or costumes. The reunion was complicated. Your family, after so many years, looked at you with a mixture of disbelief and shock. You had changed so much, you were a man now, or at least you seemed. Their faces reflected a storm of emotions. Surprise, disbelief, fear, maybe a little relief when you see you alive. You remember your mother's gaze, full of deep sadness, mixed with a love that seemed to challenge time and circumstances. The explanations were long and difficult. You told your story, every adventure, every battle, every sacrifice. You described the dangers you had faced, the decisions you made, the life you had forged. You talked about your courage, your cunning, but also about your loneliness, your sorrow, about your desire to return home, even as a stranger. To your surprise, acceptance came, although slowly. It was not easy, but in the end, your family hugged you. Your story, so extraordinary, so full of difficulties, became a testimony of your strength and resilience. And although you never stopped being Catalina, the girl who escaped a convent, now you were also something else. A symbol of courage, a living legend. But disbelief soon gave way to admiration. Your story, counted with courage and detail, reached the viceroy. Surprised by your incredible trip and your survival, decided to intercede for you before the crown. Imagine you, in front of a powerful man, telling your adventures, your battles, your transformations, everything to achieve real forgiveness. The news of your request was extended rapidly by the court. Some saw you as an imposter, a woman who challenged the social order. Others, however, admired your courage, your resilience, your indomitable spirit. It was a delicate situation, a game of power and perceptions. Finally, the real answer came. A forgiveness, yes, but not only that. The king, impressed by your courage and your extraordinary life, granted you a pension and officially recognized you as a woman. Your story, which began with a desperate escape, culminated with real recognition, an unexpected victory. The viceroy, impressed by your courage and your story, granted you a pension and helped you establish you in Mexico City. After years of traveling life, you finally found some peace. I imagine it was a huge relief, after so long fleeing and struggling to survive. You dedicated yourself to prayer and religious life, finding comfort and faith after so many adversities. Your quiet life, however, was not exempt from difficulties. Fame preceded you, and although you were now a respected woman, curiosity and disbelief were still present. You had to deal with constant attention, unexpected visits, and insistent questions about your amazing life. But you, with the serenity that only faith can provide, faced everything with patience and dignity. Finally, after a life full of adventures and challenges, Catalina de Erauso died in Mexico City. Your story, although incredible, became a legend. Some considered it a saint, others an adventurer, but everyone agreed on one thing. Your life was a unique epic, a story that crossed the borders of time and became a testimony of courage and perseverance. But your story, even with the apparently quiet end, continues to generate questions. Was all right? Some historians doubt the complete veracity of your memoirs, questioning the accuracy of some details and the possible exaggeration of your exploits. It is speculated on motivation after your story. Did you seek recognition, fortune, or simply record an exceptionally extraordinary life? The authenticity of your identity as a woman has also been discussed. Some scholars raise the possibility that your male identity was more complete than you admitted. Did you fully identify as a man during your years of military life? Or was it a survival strategy that adopted an unexpected depth? And the mystery persists. What really happened in those years of your life that you have not detailed precisely? What secrets did you keep that history has not yet been able to decipher? Your life, although partially revealed, remains a fascinating enigma, a story that invites speculation and historical debate. The legacy of Catalina de Erauso, the nun who became a soldier, remains an issue of controversy and admiration. Prosody /speak. Speak, the prosody rate equals 90%, but its history, although full of uncertainty, continues to resonate in the 21st century. Your adventure, Catalina, has become a symbol of courage and transgression, inspiring novels, movies, and plays. Think of the force it represents for those who fight for their identity. For those who challenge the established social norms. Your life, although questioned, has become a legacy of rebellion. Your story, although possibly embellished in its details, question us to reflect on the construction of gender identity and the stiffness of the social norms of the time. What would happen if someone like you appeared today? Would your story be so exceptional or simply different? The fascination that awakens your life, Catalina, lies in the ability to transcend time. Your story reminds us that identity is fluid and complex, that social norms can be challenged, and that the search for authenticity is a continuous trip. You are a character who continues to inspire debates and questions about personal freedom and the construction of the narrative itself. So, what does Catalina de Erauso leave you? Beyond adventure, it leaves you a deep reflection on identity and freedom. She, a woman who challenged the most rigid social norms of her time, chose her own path, a path that led her to tour the world, to fight in battles, and to live a life that most could only dream. His courage, his audacity, his ability to constantly reinvent himself, that is what makes it such a fascinating character. Catalina not only challenged gender conventions, but also challenged the expectations of its social class. She did not settle for the role that society had assigned to her. He broke the barriers. Literally. He escaped a convent, dressed as a man, traveled to America, and became an important character in a society that did not accept it. His story is an example of how a person can rewrite his own narrative, challenging the power structures that try to define it. Its legacy transcends the borders of time. Catalina de Erauso is not just a historical character. It is a symbol of rebellion, self-determination, and human capacity to overcome the most extreme adversities. Its history reminds us that we have the power to define who we are, regardless of social expectations or limitations imposed by society. You can also rewrite your own story. I hope you enjoyed Catalina de Erauso. If you liked it, give like and subscribe for more fascinating stories. What did you think of your life full of adventures? /prosody? /speak.